What specifically about Patroclus will make Achilles listen to him?
When Achilles does not listen to anybody else.
There's something very particular about the comrade bond.
Hello, and welcome to Winnow, a couple's close reading of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm Owen Gemmer.
I'm Isabella Gemmer. We are married, and we love to talk about books together.
In this podcast, we are working our way through the entirety of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, book by book, and this particular episode will cover book 15 of the Iliad.
Yes. Nothing much to say about that.
Well, as we were sort of discussing how we would sort of organize this episode, I think there's an interesting framework overall as a comparison between the gods and the mortals, particularly in how they either stick to their guns or sort of like change their mind and sort of cave to other people's pressure. Should we go ahead and sort of spoil our framework for like which side is doing what?
Basically, we kind of noticed a pattern that the gods are more likely to give up on something they seemed like they were really gunning for, and the mortals in this book really like buckle down and they really like push forward with what they've been trying to do.
Yeah. And so I think those are in stark contrast with one another. And we've obviously talked about the relationship between the gods and mortals and how they're different throughout. But I think it's particularly clear in this book and sort of offers a really good framework. I think especially also because the book is kind of split in half, where we get kind of a bunch of scenes of the gods in the first half, and then it sort of switches to the mortals, which it often does. But I think it creates a nice sort of juxtaposition to talk about the gods and their sort of fleetingness, ephemerality of will, maybe even going so far as to say cowardice. We can talk about that.
Versus for the mortals, this book and where we are in the war and the battle, this book is very do or die.
Yeah.
Like this is a make it or break it time in the battle
Yeah.
for who's going to be victorious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we dive into those specific, let's do our big picture summaries. I'm writing a short poem to summarize each, and Bella is doing some creative writing restraint. Do you want to go first? You want me to?
I'll go first.
Cool.
So I wrote a summary of book 15 using words that do not contain the letter D. The Trojans retreat. Zeus wakes up. He's angry at Hera. She claims that it was not by her will that the ruler of the sea was able to harm Hector. Zeus tells Hera his whole plan. Hera goes to Mount Olympus and tells the other immortals to go along with anything Zeus enacts. Ares learns that his son has given up the ghost. He tries to join the battle, but Athena stops him. Iris gives a message to the ruler of the sea from Zeus to stop helping the Greeks. He acquiesces.
Ooh.
Zeus has Apollo go to Hector to reinvigorate him. The Trojans charge. Patroclus goes to try to talk Achilles into joining the fight. Hector makes it to the Greeks' ships and calls for fire. Ajax gives a couple rallying speeches.
Excellent. Yeah, that was good.
Thank you.
I knew that this would be challenging because, right, you couldn't use God, you couldn't use Poseidon, you couldn't use divine. So you did well.
Thank you.
I went back to a haiku because I was thinking again about kind of nature imagery and sort of how this book, well, I'll just read it and then talk about why I did it this way. The tides are in flux, ebb and flow are ruled by Zeus, but the crash is nigh. Because, yeah, like we've been talking about in the last 4 or 5 books, how the momentum of the battle is constantly shifting. And this is kind of feels like it's getting to the final shift where we're building up to the moment where we know now the finale kind of is going to start next book. And yet still Zeus is trying to manipulate things. Like it's very clear that all this momentum has been part of Zeus's grand plan to like give glory to Achilles.
Yes.
So that actually is kind of the first of our kind of gods caving moments, where after Zeus wakes up from Hera's trick, he's mad at her, but they're talking, and he eventually just kind of like unveils the fullness of his plan to Hera.
Yeah, it's interesting because last episode, we talked about how it's kind of frustrating how if Zeus would just tell someone his plan, then maybe the gods would calm down.
Yeah.
Or they would kind
all
of
the other gods who are kind of fighting against Zeus. Yeah.
Yeah. They would everyone would sort of back off. And that is, in essence, what happens when Hera doesn't tell all the other gods specifically Zeus's plan, but Zeus does lay out in explicit detail everything that he plans to happen.
And it's specific. It's like Patroclus will go fight, and then he even is like very clear that like I will sacrifice my own son Sarpedon for this and that. Like these people are going to die, then this is going to happen, and it's like it's very specific. Which again, it's like frustrating. It's like, oh, cool. So that means actually like
he's like, oh, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
and it is what happens.
Yeah. And that also means like when people are making choices, like are they making choices or are they just doing it because Zeus willed it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But when Hera goes back to the other gods on Mount Olympus, she doesn't lay out all the plans that Zeus told her. But she basically tells them that they need to sort of like bear whatever he does.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I think mostly she's okay with it because now she knows that the Greeks, which is like her side, the Greeks are going to be successful in the end. And so she's just like, whatever, I'll just stop.
Yeah, right. Because it sort of Zeus reveals that like, actually, we've been on the same side the whole time. Zeus is revealing like, I also want the Greeks to win because I've promised Achilles' mother that I will give him glory. And I've only been doing this to sort of like up the tension and up the stakes. And Hera's like, oh, so all of this has been happening and we could have been in agreement the whole time. And yet, yeah. Mm-hmm. But she kind of, just acquiesces and is just like, all right, fine. I guess that's good because it means our sort of end goals are in alignment with one another.
Yeah.
Like Zeus, after he sort of sends Hera off, he calls both Apollo and Iris and gives them both instructions. He tells Apollo, because Apollo has been on the Trojan side, he's like, hey, go make sure Hector's okay, encourage Hector, and like fight for the Trojans.
Yeah.
And then he tells Iris, like, hey, go talk to Neptune, who's currently fighting on the Greek side, and just tell Neptune or Poseidon to like knock it off and just like leave. Because it's time right now for the Trojans to sort of resurge as the kind of final moment before Achilles.
Yeah. And at first, Poseidon is like, he kind of lays out how he sees his relationship with Zeus. He does kind of see them as more equals. Like he talks about how Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades, back in the day, they split up the heavens, the earth, or the heavens, the sea, and the underworld. And he sees them as kind of like more like three equal rulers of these different spaces. And he is always angry with like, why does Zeus have to always claim that he's like a step above everyone else? He sees them as more equal.
Yeah. And I want to say like Poseidon's speech is very good. Like it's a compelling argument. It's articulated well. And he seems to believe very firmly that like, I'm not going to let my older brother bully me around and tell me what to do. Like I'm my own man. I have control over this and I'm doing this. And like when I read it at first, I was like, yeah, you tell him, Poseidon. Like finally somebody's willing to stand up to Zeus. Like we saw Hera stand up to Zeus a little bit in the last book with her kind of trick. And I was like, all right, yeah, now Poseidon's doing it. Like we're getting this like, right. In some ways, the two people most capable, Zeus's wife and Zeus's brother, are like the two of all the gods most capable of standing up to him. And so I was like, all right, let's go. But then it changes so quickly because Iris is basically like, that's a bolt. You want me to go back to Zeus and tell him that?
Yeah. She basically, let me find this exact wording. Should I take these harsh, aggressive comments back to Zeus? Or will you modify them in some way? A mind that can be changed is always best. Remember that the Furies always serve the senior members of the family. She basically says, so do you want to rethink this?
Yeah.
This response?
But I think it's also interesting that she makes an appeal to the Fates and the Furies, where like the Furies always side with the older brother. And so basically she's saying that like if you go to war with your brother over this, like you're gonna lose.
Yeah.
That seems to be the appeal she's making, that like you can't actually win this fight. Like you're not equal. Like you might see yourself as equal because you all sort of agreed to have shared domain over these three things, but like everybody else still sees the hierarchy of age being important. Yeah. And so you're little brother, so you gotta do what your big brother says.
And we should say, and then Poseidon immediately like basically caves, and he's like, yeah, you're right, whatever, I'm going. And he just like,
yeah,
gone.
It's so fast and so complete. It's just a total 180.
Yeah, he's totally gone. But it is interesting to, again, see like the way in which Zeus is a leader of the gods. He rules by being a bully. They fear him rather than respect him, I think.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe I got from this book, especially how he talks to Hera when he's like, you tricked me, don't do it again, or else. Do you remember the time he's like, I hung you by your toes in the sky? It's like goes on to describe he basically like tortured her. The hierarchy is definitely Zeus on top, but it's like, it's a strange order.
Right. It's not out of the like mutual consent of those below him, which obviously I think good leadership should be, right? Like we should rule with the consent and the support of those below us who want us in charge in different ways. And this is very much not that. He is like placed himself above and rules with an iron fist. Or
like that's just, it's almost like with the gods, you're just kind of like, that's just the way things are.
Yeah, and I think that's Iris's thing of like, Poseidon, like, the Furies, they like always side with the older brother. It's just kind of the way of the world.
And when you talk about like Zeus being the oldest, like they're all really old. Right. I always find that funny because they're all very old. So like how much older is Zeus than everyone else?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you meet like two, like a pair of twins and sometimes they do that thing where one of them insists that they were born like 5 seconds before the other.
Right.
And then that makes them like they have like automatic seniority, but you're like, okay, but you're not really born. Like, you're not really the older brother.
Right.
That's kind of the vibe when Zeus says he's the oldest.
Yeah. Yeah. So Poseidon caves, and I think it along with sort of Hera caving a little bit and all these, it seems to point to this like idea again that the gods are playing the long game, that like it's not worth it. Like he could pick a fight. He recognizes like, oh yeah, like I might be picking a bigger fight with Zeus than I really want to get into. And like, clearly he doesn't care that much about his position, or else he would stand firmer. And so, he's just like, and I think that's right. We've talked about this before, a feature of their immortality, that like when you are going to live forever, the scale of drama changes drastically because it's like, is this really that important?
Mm-hmm. And Poseidon decides no. And similarly, we get a moment from Ares. Ares learns that like one of his sons, like one of his demigod sons down on the battlefield has died. And this is right after Hera says like, we should all stop intervening. He's like, oh, my son died. I should definitely go intervene. And so he like puts on his armor and he's like walking out the front door. And Athena is like, this is stupid. You should not go. And he also immediately is like, just says, oh yeah, you're right, and doesn't go. So I think it's such a small moment, but it reminds me of like how, one of the overarching themes of the Iliad is a father's anger over what has happened to their child, right? Like that's one of the themes. And like, how does a father behave or act when their son or daughter has died or been taken from them in some way? And we see like how much chaos that causes when it's from the mortal's perspective. But when it's an immortal god and their demigod son has died, it's very quickly like persuaded that it's actually not that big of a deal, Yeah. So it's like it's a mortal, immortal contrast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's interesting for me personally is that like, I think obviously I'm on the record quite extensively of like complaining with all of the gods, like intervening so much. And so like from that perspective, I should be very happy that they're all deciding to like step back. But then when it actually is happening, I'm like, come on, like stick to your guns at least. Because right, like the moment with Mars or Ares, like intervening with his son, like that is very similar to in book 3, there was a duel between Menelaus and Paris over Helen. And it was like, if this ends, like, we will end the whole war. And it was almost about to end the whole war when one of the gods intervened, and then everything went back to chaos. And so, like, there's part of me that's just like, if they had just had this conversation a few days ago, like, the war would be over by now. And yet now all of a sudden they're not intervening when they've been intervening to, like, literally, like, keep the entire war going. Yeah. It's just, it further shows their fickleness of, like, sometimes they're like, yeah, I'm going to intervene and I'm going to save my favorite mortal. And now they're just like, oh, I guess it's time to stop doing that. So all of this is, of course, in stark contrast with the mortals, who have short lives in general, and particularly in this book might have very, very short lives, right? Because this is kind of, in some ways, the climax of the battle, where the Trojans are like, all right, we're at the ships, like, we're bringing fire. They have, like, broken through the wall. They have, like, torches, and they are, like, literally fighting at the feet of the ships. And so the Trojans feel like, we could literally win this in the next couple of hours. And then the Greeks, on the contrast, are like, we could literally all die in the next couple hours, or at the very least, like, our ships will all be burned and we won't have any way to get home. And so it is, like, for them, do or die, like, right now, right this very hour. And so they have the exact opposite motivation of the gods, who are like, let's just see how it plays out and who really cares, where the mortals are all like, no, like, this is the time. Let's start with some of our main mortals in this book. Hector.
Because it is Zeus's will that Hector, like, he'll make it all the way to the ships, maybe set 1 or 2, or I'm not sure how many will eventually get set on fire, but we're going to see some fire. And then this is what spurs Patroclus to join.
But Hector doesn't know this.
And so Hector, we see him just he gets more and more, like, intense. He becomes more and more convinced that Zeus is 100% on his side.
Because now Apollo's with him, right? Like, Apollo literally comes down and is like, yo, Zeus sent me to, like, help you out. Like,
Apollo, not in the form of some other random guy. It's like Apollo himself. And Hector, he has a line, something about like you can always tell when Zeus himself wills something. Like, he's like so sure, and he's like, and Zeus is willing that, like, I will be successful. And it starts to become tragic and morbid, I think, from the reader's perspective, because it's like, yeah, you're right, Hector. Zeus does will this, but it is ultimately not, like, for a positive end. Like, Zeus will, like, you are going to be successful, and Zeus is making it happen.
You are right about the short term, but you have no idea about the long-term plan.
But it's all, like, the long-term plan is that you will die. So, like, Hector just gets, like, he's been, like, totally manipulated into just being a pawn, I think, in this moment.
Yeah, and I think it's especially tragic because, like, Hector was just injured. He was taken away and had to be, like, revived and things like this. And that could have been his opportunity to, like, pull back, go back to the city, retreat, regroup, rethink, things like this, like, recognize, like, oh, maybe we're not up for this. But because Apollo comes down and is encouraging, he's like, I'm back up, like, we're ready to go again. And so he never gets the opportunity to, like, consider the retreat or the return home. He's just, like, sort of gaslit back into the fight. Because, right, despite Zeus telling all the other gods don't intervene, and Hera joining him in that command, well, Apollo gets to go. Apollo's going to go intervene really directly and, like, literally, like, heal Hector and encourage him and, like, go fight with him.
Yeah, but there's something about the way that Hector is so sort of artificially invigorated.
Yes.
It's just the god. It's like the gods are just, like, literally, like, injecting him with adrenaline. Like, that's, like, what I'm, like, picturing. And it starts to become really morbid to me, because he's like a zombie and he doesn't know it yet. He's a dead man walking, just fueled with adrenaline.
Yeah.
And, like, it brings up, like, like, it gives me, like, zombie vibes, you know, if that makes sense.
But sort of even worse, because it's not mind, like he's doing it of his own will. Like he has, yeah, like it is not that he is simply possessed and is acting out of accord with his will, that he has aligned his will with Zeus, and Zeus doesn't want him alive. And so it's worse than if Zeus was just like commanding him and compelling him to do this. It's like he has chosen this for himself because he does not yet know that the will who is supporting him is not ultimately, supporting him in the long term.
Yeah. He feels like a very different guy than when we see him, talking to his wife, Andromache. Mm-hmm. He's gone like totally war crazy, I feel like. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, just like very different than how he started off.
Yeah. And tragic, I think.
Yeah. I think it's supposed to be pretty tragic.
Mm-hmm. Because, like we keep getting reminders from the gods and from others that like there's a bigger plan involved. There is a lot of dramatic irony happening.
Yeah. Where
we, the readers, know, which again, like I think dramatic irony in any context can on the one hand be frustrating because it feels like spoilers, that like there's a way to read something that is spoilery as just like, well, this is annoying because now I know what's going to happen. But when it's done well, that what you sacrifice in spoiler, you gain in this dramatic irony that creates more tragedy, more empathy and things like that. I think it's another thing that like Shakespeare does super well. Where like when you get, I'm thinking particularly of Othello that I teach often, where like on the one hand, when Iago like has a soliloquy where he just like lays out his whole plan, you're like, oh, well now I know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But then what the disappointment that comes from that is hopefully replaced by this like, oh, now I get to like see how it plays out and feel even more the distance between Othello and Iago. And yeah. I think that's when dramatic irony works well, it's really great. And when it doesn't work, it just feels disappointing. And I think I go back and forth. There are some moments where I feel like it's not being used well, where it's just like, now you're just spoiling it. But I do feel like in this moment, these kinds of things, in talking with you about it, makes me think, okay, I see what it's doing with Hector's character, creating that further tragedy. Yeah.
And it sort of like plays into a very human inclination, I think, that we all have, which is like sometimes we want to like see the car crash, like, and because it's a made up story, it's like not real in a sense. Like there is something that allows us to like turn and kind of watch with like really morbid curiosity.
Yeah.
To be like, ooh, this is going to be bad.
Yeah, I mean, once we finish the Iliad and Odyssey, it would be interesting if we continue to read some Greek tragedies, because we can talk about that like the form of a Greek tragedy was super, super popular precisely for those reasons, because it is so compelling in kind of a twisted way. Mm-hmm.
Which ties in very nicely to why I have recently become obsessed with Stephen King novels.
So the Trojans have, with Hector's reinvigorated, fervor for battle, have charged again. They have again sort of crossed over the wall that they kind of destroyed a little bit previously, and are like at the ships. And so we then flash to Patroclus, who, if you remember last, Achilles had sent him out to go see like who had been injured, and then Achilles stayed back, but Patroclus was out there like helping heal some people who had been injured. And so we pick up with him in Eurypylus' tent, sort of seeing like the Trojans run by and realizing like, uh-oh, things are very bad.
Yes.
And so he is standing firm now, recognizing that like, this is the moment. I've got to do something. I can't sit back any further. And so he has a similar like Hector is sort of charged, and now he has realized like, this is the time we've got to make our stand, and I have to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read Patroclus's little speech as he runs off to talk to Achilles. The conflict has intensified too much. Your man must care for you. I have to hurry to coax Achilles to rejoin the war. Who knows? My words may stir his angry heart. Perhaps if some divinity is with us, persuasion from a friend can be effective.
Yeah. So again, if we're thinking about this overall framework of those who sort of like cave to their sort of positions versus those who sort of hold fast, in some ways, Patroclus is kind of walking the line between those because he is sort of holding fast and like standing his ground. But in so doing, his goal is to convince Achilles to give up his ground, right?
Yeah.
Achilles has been the one this whole time sticking to his guns and saying, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight. He's been the most sort of obstinate. And yet Patroclus is now being obstinate that like, I need to go convince Achilles to relent and to sort of give up and to cave, just like all the other gods have caved.
In past books, other people have tried to persuade Achilles. When Phoenix and Odysseus and Ajax, they were chosen to go try to persuade Achilles because they were like his friends, you know, like, and they like, and Phoenix specifically took this very strong, like father figure type role, in that. And as we remember, it didn't work. And here, so in the passage I just read, Patroclus refers to himself as a friend. Persuasion from a friend can be effective. So basically, we wanted to look at the Greek word behind friend here in this passage, because we want to try to figure out what specifically about Patroclus will make Achilles listen to him.
When Achilles does not listen to anybody else.
Yeah, like why is their relationship specific to the two of them? So what is the Greek word?
Yes. So it actually, when I read translations that use friend, I expected it to be like philia or something like that, which is related to the verb to love, but specifically in like a friend-like way, like Philadelphia or philosophy. But it is not actually. The verb is heteros, which is translated as comrade or companion most often. So the dictionary gives it as like a comrade, a companion, a mate. And so it seems to have much more comrade, camaraderie, those kinds of things. Obviously, that is still a form of friendship, but it's not related to the word for love. Like there are words for friends that are related to the word for love, but this is different. It is a more like not. It doesn't seem explicitly like militaristic. It seems like you could use this for like your pupils at school or people like that you like associate closely with, but that aren't like close friends.
Yeah, and so when we discovered this in the Greek, I thought it was really interesting because last book and in this book, there is the thing that people use in their speeches that to rally the Greeks. So last book, it was the way that Poseidon talked to the Greeks. He told them to like implant in their hearts like shame of being cowardly, sort of. And last book we talked about that word that was translated as shame is kind of like having so much respect or reverence for like the men you're fighting with that you need to try to be your best. And similarly in this book, Ajax gives a couple really good rousing speeches.
Which again is another example of him sort of standing firm and recognizing we need to stand strong here.
Yeah, so Ajax says to all the Greeks, "My friends, be men and place inside your hearts respect and reverence for one another, no matter how intense the fighting gets. Those who respect and care for one another are usually not killed. They may survive, but those who run away receive no glory and no assistance on the battlefield." So this passage, in conjunction with Patroclus referring to sort of himself as Achilles' comrade, it just kind of reinforces that like there's something very particular about the comrade bond. This sense of like the person who is going to save you is going to be the guy standing next to you. I imagine if someone is reading the Iliad and they're a veteran, someone who's like actually been in war, I imagine that they would have like a very good sense of like what that comrade bond is like, and how it's probably much more deep and complex than like we don't really have a word for it, but it's probably very different than friendship.
Yeah.
Not to say that it like one is like better or deeper than the other, but I just feel like comrade is like it's probably a very specific thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, right, like neither of us have any military experience, but we both have experience like on sports teams. And I've coached a couple sports teams. And I think oftentimes athletics are the kind of layperson's war. And oftentimes coaches use that similar sort of language to sort of inspire like team camaraderie. And I think that term gets used for teams that like you need to support each other. And I think even sometimes that can be contrary to friendship, right? Like, you know, I've been a high school teacher and coached high school sports, and oftentimes there's teenage drama. And like, if you have two players on your team who like outside of the sports are like beefing with each other, like you have to figure out a way to get them to put that aside for the sake of the sport. And that like camaraderie actually can exist absent of friendship, and sometimes in spite of friendship. So yeah, they are different things. I think, yeah, right. Like again, you're right to say that like one might be deeper or less deep. Like that isn't as interesting as like thinking that they do seem to be distinct relationships, that of a friend and that of a comrade.
So putting it back into context, Patroclus thinks that Achilles will listen to him if he talks to him like a comrade. And he does. So yeah. So I think next book, obviously we'll get to the actual conversation that they have with one another and the actual exchange. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
To see, with this in mind, what way does Patroclus talk to Achilles?
Yeah, and I was just thinking again in the abstract of like what might be the difference between the relationship you would have with a friend versus with a comrade, whether that be in war or like in sports or things like that. And I'm like, my first instinct was to think like, well, in the comrade scenario, there's a much clearer like common goal of like we are working for these objectives, but I don't think that fully captures it because you and your friends can have common goals and different things. But I wonder how much of it is actually the presence of an adversary that changes it, where like most friends, even if you have very clear common goals, like there's not a direct opponent who is trying to do the same thing but opposite, right? Like in sports, I'm trying to win and there's a group of people who are also doing the exact same thing, trying to win, and those are kind of mutually exclusive. Or in war, I'm trying to kill them, they're trying to kill me. Like friendship doesn't have that. There might be, we have this relationship and we have this common goal, but there's not like another group doing the same thing in a way that is mutually exclusive to our success. And I wonder if that is what makes the difference, that changes the relationship when, right, we are bonded together because we're on the same team or in the same army, and there is a clear other group, out group that we are going against that creates this different kind of relationship.
It's also interesting because like the Greek army can be subdivided into all these little armies.
Yes.
So because of that, I don't think Achilles can always rely on Odysseus to give him the best advice, because ultimately the things Odysseus are going to do are going to benefit particularly him, and the things that Ajax does are going to particularly benefit him
and his people.
Right.
And because Patroclus is from among the Myrmidons, there's this sort of nationalistic bond as well. And then I think, right, like the semi-familial bond as well, where like they did sort of grow up together in different ways at parts of their life. So this isn't to say that Patroclus and Achilles don't have any friendship or form of love. They might have that in addition to the camaraderie, but it's important here that in this moment, Patroclus is appealing to their camaraderie, not to their friendship or their familiarity or their nationalistic bonds or things like that. It's particularly like the camaraderie that he's mentioning.
Yeah, because people have tried to appeal to Achilles' friendship before, and that obviously didn't work.
So I think we have been sort of building up to this moment, not just in this episode, but I feel like for the last couple of books, really, maybe even the last like 6 or so, where we've known this is coming and we're finally sort of, I think, getting to the parts that everybody loves to talk about. And so I'm excited for the next book. And if you would like to read ahead, I will have an audiobook of Samuel Butler's translation of book 16. or you can read along in whatever other translation. And we'll be back here next week with another episode.
Yeah. Until then, happy reading.
Happy reading.